How much would you give to keep your family close? Your time. Your money. Your soul. She thought love meant sacrifice, that giving was the price of belonging. But what if the people you trust most aren't just taking? They are using. One message. One slip. That's all it takes for a perfect world to crack wide open. When love turns to betrayal, and loyalty becomes a trap, would you have the strength to break free? Stay with her. The truth is coming, and it changes everything. Ivy Monroe was the kind of woman people envied. Sharp mind, impeccable style, and a name that echoed in boardrooms across the city. She'd built her business from the ground up, transforming sleepless nights and endless sacrifices into a thriving empire. But behind the tailored suits and polished smile was a heart tethered to something far more personal, a family she would do anything for. To Ivy, success wasn't just about climbing the ladder, it was about making sure her parents and younger brother, Kevin, never had to worry again. Rent paid. Medical bills covered. Kevin's startup idea that never quite launched. Funded twice. She did it all willingly, without a second thought. Because family came first. Always. But not everyone saw it that way. Knox Wilder, the man who once made her believe in forever, stood at the edge of her life, watching her give pieces of herself away, bit by bit, until there was nothing left for them. Ivy, are you sure they actually need that money? His voice was steady, but the frustration simmered beneath the surface. Or are you just letting them manipulate you? Your parents complain about being broke, but I keep seeing them post photos, new designer bags, spa days, weekend getaways. Does that sound desperate to you? Ivy stiffened. The words hit hard, but she masked it with a cold laugh. You don't understand, Knox. They've been through so much. Helping them is the least I can do. That's what family is about, something you clearly don't get. His eyes darkened. No, what I don't get is how you can't see what's right in front of you. The silence that followed was thick, choking. Then the dam broke. The argument escalated like wildfire, sharp words, accusations, hurt piled on hurt. Ivy, defending her choices with a trembling voice. Knox, trying to pull her back from a cliff she didn't know she was standing on. And then came the words that shattered her. I love you, Ivy. But maybe I can't do this anymore. He didn't yell. He didn't plead. He just walked away. And Ivy was left in the echo of his absence, holding on to a love that slipped through her fingers, and a family that never seemed to let go. 2 weeks after Knox walked out, Ivy buried herself in work, pretending the silence he left behind didn't echo through every corner of her life. She was determined to prove, mostly to herself, that everything was fine. Controlled. Predictable. Until Kevin called. Sis, I've got a problem. My laptop just died. Completely bricked. How am I supposed to work like this? I need a new one ASAP. Can you help me out? His voice had that familiar urgency, tinged with just enough panic to tug at her heart. He always sounded like a kid who needed saving, even now, fully grown. Don't worry about it, Kev. I'll order you a new one today. It'll be there tomorrow. You're the best, Ivy. I swear I'll pay you back when things pick up. She didn't need the promise. She never did. The next day, a sleek new laptop was delivered to Kevin's apartment. And a few days later, his old one arrived at Ivy's office, wrapped in bubble wrap, along with a short thank you note. She held it in her hands, hesitating. It wasn't cheap, and part of her hated waste. Maybe it could still be useful for her smaller tasks, emails, scheduling, nothing serious. On impulse, she sent it to a repair shop. 3 days later, the technician called. Good news, it's fixed. Just needed a new battery and a little cleaning. Should run fine now. She picked it up after work, satisfied with the decision. That night, alone in her apartment, Ivy powered it on to check its speed. And that's when everything began to unravel. The desktop loaded slowly, cluttered with Kevin's files and tabs. She moved to log out, but a notification popped up, Facebook Messenger. Kevin's account was still logged in. Her hand hovered over the trackpad, ready to close it. But a flashing group chat message caught her eye, Family Squad. The words that followed burned into her like ice. ATM just came through again. And a brand new laptop this time, LOL. Mom, fake another illness and we'll get 3K easy. She froze. Her breath hitched. Another message appeared. She's still as gullible as ever. Whine a little, and she opens the vault. Didn't I tell you just say your laptop broke? Worked like a charm. Her heart pounded. Her fingers shook. Then came the last blow. Oh, and ask her to pay for the beach trip next week. Dad and I need some RR. Silence. Ivy sat there, staring at the screen, her reflection dimmed in the laptop's glare. For a long, suffocating moment, she couldn't move. They weren't just taking advantage of her. They were mocking her. A joke. A walking ATM. Her fingers moved on their own, scrolling through months of chat history. Images of luxury cars, 5-star resorts, champagne toasts. And the lies, constant, seamless lies. Medical bills that never existed. Emergencies that were weekend getaways in disguise. Kevin, playing both sides, feigning guilt just enough to pull her back in. It wasn't care. It wasn't love. It was exploitation. Tears welled, but she didn't let them fall. Not this time. She grabbed her phone and dialed. Her mother answered on the second ring. Ivy, darling. I was just about to call. Listen, I'm feeling a bit dizzy today, must be my blood pressure. You think you could help with some meds? They're expensive and... I saw the messages. Her voice was cold. All of them. Silence. Then a laugh, sharp, dismissive. Oh, come on, Ivy. You know we're just messing around. It's a family joke. Lighten up. Is that what I am to you? A joke? Her father chimed in, voice thick with condescension. You're overreacting. We raised you, didn't we? You've got more money than you know what to do with. What's a few thousand here or there? Kevin's voice, quieter, hesitant. Ivy. I didn't mean for you to see that. I was just... Save it. Her hands were steady now. Icy calm. I'm done. No more money. No more favors. Don't call me again. And with that, she hung up. For the first time in her life, Ivy Monroe chose herself. Within hours of cutting them off, Ivy's phone exploded with calls and messages. Her voicemail was flooded, desperation, guilt-tripping, veiled threats. And when the calls stopped working, they showed up at her door. 7 a.m. Noon. Midnight. Pounding fists, ringing doorbells, voices echoing through the halls of her apartment building. Ivy, open the damn door. Her father's voice thundered through the intercom. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us. Her mother's cries followed, sharp, piercing, calculated. I'm sick, Ivy. If you don't help, I could die. Is that what you want? Knox will know what kind of daughter you really are. She stood inside, unmoving. Her phone buzzed endlessly in her hand, but Ivy didn't flinch. Not anymore. Then came the message that cut deeper than the rest. Knox knew the truth before you. He warned you. But you chose us over him. He's gone now. Was it worth it? The words stung, but this time, they didn't break her. Something had changed. She wasn't the same woman who once scrambled to fix every crisis, to pour herself dry for people who only saw her as a wallet with a pulse. That Ivy was gone. And in her place stood someone stronger. That night, her phone lit up again. Knox Wilder. She stared at his name for a long moment before opening the message. I heard what happened. I just want to know. This time, are you choosing yourself? No blame. No judgment. Just a quiet question that shook her to the core. Her fingers trembled, then steadied. You were right, Knox. I let them control me for too long. But not anymore. I've changed. No plea for forgiveness. No begging him to come back. Because this wasn't about him. This was about her. The next morning, her parents returned, looking haggard and frantic. Ivy watched from the window as her mother clutched her chest dramatically, her father pacing and shouting into his phone. Then the intercom buzzed. Please, Ivy. Just help us this once. We can't pay rent. Your mother's health, she might not last the week. Do you want that on your conscience? Her heart didn't race this time. Her voice didn't shake. She pressed the intercom button, her tone icy calm. I hope you get the help you need. But it won't be from me. Click. Silence. No tears. No guilt. Just freedom. For the first time in her life, Ivy Monroe chose herself, and she didn't look back. Months passed. Not a word from her family. Not a message from Knox. Ivy didn't chase either. She poured herself into rebuilding, not just her business, but her life. She learned to sit in silence without feeling lonely, to stand alone without feeling abandoned. And somewhere in that quiet, she found herself, someone fierce, grounded, and finally free. So when she walked into the gala that night, head held high, confidence radiating from every step, she didn't expect to see him. Knox Wilder. Standing across the room, drink in hand, talking to someone, but his eyes locked on hers the second she entered. He didn't look angry. He didn't look hurt. He looked surprised. She didn't avoid him. She didn't freeze. Instead, she walked straight up to him, calm and steady. Knox. He gave her a long look, assessing, curious. Ivy. You look different. She smiled faintly. That's because I am. The silence between them was thick, not with tension, but something unspoken. Something waiting. She didn't wait for him to ask. You used to think I'd always choose them over myself. And for a long time, you were right. Her voice didn't waver. But I'm not that woman anymore. I've chosen me. Knox studied her, eyes searching for cracks, for signs of the old Ivy. He didn't find any. But he wasn't ready to say what she wanted to hear. Not yet. People don't change overnight, he said quietly. Sometimes they fall back. Sometimes they need one last test. As if the universe had heard him, her phone buzzed. A familiar number. Her mother. She didn't answer. A minute later, it buzzed again, this time, a text. Ivy, we're outside your building. Please, just come down. Your father is sick. We have nowhere else to go. You don't want to regret this. Ivy turned the screen toward Knox, showing him the message. You wanted a test, she said softly. Watch. She typed quickly. Do not contact me again. This is your last warning. Send. Then she blocked the number. Simple. Final. Knox exhaled slowly, eyes never leaving hers. Then he smiled. I think I can trust you now. He didn't promise forever. She didn't ask for it. But in that moment, standing side by side, they both knew, this time, whatever came next would be on her terms. And Ivy Monroe was no longer a woman to be used or broken. The calls stopped. The pleading, the guilt trips, the late-night knocks, they all faded into silence. With no one left to lean on, Ivy's family was forced to stand on their own feet. She didn't ask what happened to them. She didn't need to know. Their survival was no longer her burden. For the first time in years, Ivy Monroe lived for herself. No more draining bank accounts for someone else's comfort. No more sacrificing peace for approval. She filled her days with purpose, her nights with rest, and her heart with something she'd never truly known before, freedom. She wasn't a walking ATM. She wasn't a lifeline to people who didn't value her. She was her own. When Knox came back into her life, it wasn't with grand promises or rushed declarations. It was slow, intentional. They rebuilt, not on guilt or obligation, but on mutual respect. One evening, as they walked through the park, Knox turned to her, eyes warm. You're different now, he said. Not harder. Just stronger. She smiled, the kind that reached her soul. Because I finally chose me. He didn't need to say anything else. His hand found hers, and for the first time, they walked forward together, not dragging the weight of the past behind them. Ivy didn't just reclaim her love. She reclaimed herself. And that was the greatest victory of all.